they misunderstand, why don't you think he's a martyr? And it's like, because I heard what he said.
Yeah.
Right.
Was Charlie Kirk a martyr? This is a question that has been permeating the online conversation, the online zeitgeist for a while in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. And it is something I have seen really divide a lot of Christians. I would say a particular kind of Christian online and on circles. And obviously, Charlie Kirk's death has been an unavoidable topic for a lot of believers, a lot of podcasters who kind of feel the need to bring it up and talk about it, but they talk about it in their own way. One of the most recent, I guess, I don't even want to call it a controversy, but more of something that has gone viral is Jackie Hill Perry's comments on Charlie Kirk. And we're going to look into that. And a lot of people were not happy with her comment, and for various reasons. And I would say that Jackie Hill Perry's comment is not in the same light of what we have been seeing with a lot of very specific Black pastors who were just absolutely horrible and disparaging in their comments. I would actually say Jackie's comment was at least very, very mild compared to what we've seen in other comments, in other viral videos we've seen on disparaging of Charlie. I don't think she was disparaging Charlie. This also isn't a video to bash Jackie Hill Perry. I actually really like her. I've read her books. I think she is phenomenal in a lot of areas that she speaks about. But there obviously are some criticisms. So we're going to look into that. But please like this video if you think Charlie Kirk was a martyr. And if you don't think he was a martyr, also like this video because it just helps the algorithm. So let's get right into it. We're going to watch clips from With the Perrys on their thoughts on the culture war, specifically when it comes to politics and Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, I think if I'm just I know I've been talking a lot, but I think if I'm being all the way honest, you know, I didn't celebrate Charlie's death. I was sad because I think every human being should have been sad to see somebody die that way. But one of the things that grieved me was seeing so many believers who appreciated Charlie not being able to understand why we might not be as impacted over his death in the same way that you are.
Can I don't want to reword your language, but I also want to add to your language mid-speech.
Okay, yeah. Help me. Be my helper.
No.
So I want to respond to Preston's comment specifically. I don't think people who are conservative or who were personally impacted by Charlie are expecting people who are outside of that bubble to have some compassion. I think the bare minimum, and you even kind of mentioned it as well, the bare minimum is just say, hey, I'm sorry for your friend. And we even saw that with, Ali Beth Stuckey made that comment with her episode on Surrounded, and she was around progressive Christians, and they just said, I'm sorry for your friend. That is the bare minimum, and you just don't say anything else. Like, if you're not impacted by Charlie Kirk's death in the way that a lot of people in the conservative movement was, you don't need to say anything else. All you need to say is just say, hey, I'm sorry for your friend. And then that's it. You don't need a podcast about it. And might sound a little, critical or cynical there or harsh, but it's like, that's it. There doesn't really need to be more pondering. It's just like, if you don't understand, you don't understand. But it's like in the wake of their grief, you're kind of demanding that they understand your grief. To me, that's a little, that boggles my mind a little bit, because you said what grieves you, and maybe that was just your choice of words, but it's like, what grieves you in that context that's not what's happening. People are actually grieving, actually mourning the loss of someone's life that was dear to them. And you're grieving that they don't understand your perspective, but do you understand their perspective? That's the thing. You're grieving that they don't understand why you weren't impacted. But my retort would be, but do you understand why they were impacted outside of just personal, like he was my friend, he was my spouse, he was my father, he's my best friend, he was my colleague, my peer. Outside of that, do you understand that? So I think this is something that we do a lot in the Christian space, where it's like we demand things from other people that we and ourselves don't do for others. And that is something that is antithetical to the kingdom, in the sense that when you look at what Jesus chastised the Pharisees for, it was because they created systems that other people should live by, that no one else could live by those systems. No one else could live by those standards. And they would put those standards on other people and then tell people that they were living by those standards when in reality they weren't. So I think the standard of, hey, they need to, like, it grieves me that they don't understand, or I wish they understood why Charlie Kirk's death doesn't impact me in the way that it impacts them. But if that's your standard, you have to apply that to yourself. But do you understand why Charlie Kirk's death impacted them outside of the obvious of like personal relationship, of the ethos of the conservative movements and all that? And obviously people can do, I'm already hearing and obviously know people are going to do the whataboutisms and whatnot, but let's continue.
To say not only grieving in a way that's distinct, but also grieving, or they misunderstand, why don't you think he's a martyr? And it's like, because I heard what he said.
Yeah. Right.
And so it's not that I don't appreciate his stances on abortion, on sexuality, on marriage,
Yes.
but it's also I hear other things alongside that don't give martyr.
So this is what got Jackie Hill Perry in hot water by a lot of people. Because right off the bat, and Jackie Hill Perry knows her stuff. And hopefully after this, she's most likely has had private conversations with people. But I hope she knows that the standard of martyrdom isn't based off of what anyone says. That is just not the standard of martyr. It is not based off what anyone has said at any moment in their life. It is not based on what you think someone said. It is not based off of your interpretation or how you took something someone said. That is not martyrdom. There's no biblical case for that. There is no Orthodox historical Christian basis for that. And it's a little bit frustrating because if you are Protestant, if you're evangelical, you know that this falls in the realm of why our Catholic brothers and Eastern Orthodox brothers and sisters, what they criticize Protestants for. They criticize Protestants for unclear definitions of things, arbitrarily defining things based off of personal preference rather than church orthodoxy, church history, eldership. To not know what the standards of martyrdom is, and to put your own standard of martyrdom based off of your disagreement with someone on an arbitrary basis. That is what Catholics and Eastern Orthodox criticize Protestants for when it comes to other church traditions and theological positions. And you have to call it like it is, right? So I want to pause a little bit because I want to see what other faiths, the other sects, Catholicism and Eastern Orthodox, say about martyrdom. And I asked ChatGPT, I said, what are the 3 qualifications of a martyr according to the Catholicism? And it said, according to Catholic teaching, a person is recognized as a martyr if they meet 3 qualifications. Death, the person must suffer a violent death. Martyrdom, by definition, involves the loss of life rather than merely suffering or persecution. Cause, the person must die for the faith, or in odium fidei, in hatred of the faith. This means the persecutor's motive must be rooted in hatred of Christianity or a particular Christian virtue. So I think that's key. It's not just a matter of being killed because they're Christian or a hatred of Christianity. It is also for a particular Christian virtue, truth, or moral stance. And third, voluntariness. The person must willingly accept death out of love for Christ and fidelity to the faith. While not necessarily seeking death, they must face it with the intention of remaining faithful to God rather than renouncing their beliefs. So I think just on this Catholic standard, right? And Charlie Kirk wasn't Catholic, despite the rumors, but obviously he received a violent death, right? I think that's obvious, checks box. The person must die for the faith. And you could debate the former, right? Is like, was he killed because he was a Christian, right? That very broad kind of example You can debate that, but the cause is saying of a particular Christian virtue, truth, or moral stance. Charlie Kirk debated people on the family, the importance of the family. He debated gender ideology, trans ideology. He debated very specific particular Christian virtues, truth, or moral stances. If you don't know that, just go rewatch his videos. I shouldn't have to defend that or explain that even more. And also voluntariness. The person must willingly accept death out of love. If you think Charlie Kirk didn't know his life was at risk when he had so much security around him, it means he willingly accepted the risks. He knew the risks. And you could say that in some instances, he doesn't fit these criterias 100% to the T, but it's very darn close. Very darn close. Now, notice what this doesn't say. The Catholic teaching does not say a person who is a martyr must meet the criteria of saying things perfectly and never offending anyone. Never offending people who he might disagree with, it does not say never offending a particular ethnic group by your words. It doesn't say that. So in short, violent death for the faith and willing acceptance. I found this article by a Catholic priest, Father Dwight Longenecker, great name, is Charlie Kirk a martyr? We use the word martyr pretty lightly these days. Any victim might become a martyr, and some unworthy people or their defenders have sought to magnify certain victims and, if possible, turn them into martyrs in order to further a political or personal agenda. There are two definitions of martyr that might be applied to Charlie Kirk. Two questions to ask. First, the definition the Catholic Church uses when determining if a person is a martyr. If they died tragically for some other reason, the Church grieves their death, but they are not necessarily deemed a martyr. So, for example, a tragic death of a pious young person may well cause a groundswell of grief, rage, and horror, but these strong emotions do not qualify to make a person a martyr. If they die for a political agenda, a personal agenda, or some worthy cause like ending a war, or some injustice, that doesn't mean they were a martyr. I'm thinking of a nun in South America some time ago who was protesting the ecological destruction of the rainforest by big forestry companies. She was assassinated and died for the cause, but even though she was a nun, I don't think she was called a martyr. To officially be declared a martyr by the Catholic Church, 4 criteria are necessary. They must have been killed. The motive of their murder must be odium fidei, or hatred of the Catholic faith. The victim must freely and consciously accept death without resistance, seeking only to witness the faith, not suicide or provoking death. The martyr endures it as an act of love and obedience to God, forgiving persecutors if possible. The person must be a baptized Catholic. Heretics or schismatics are excluded, as martyrdom requires fidelity to the full truth of the Catholic faith. Charlie Kirk was murdered in a horrific act of violence, not only in public, but also in front of his wife and 2 young children. We shall all be clear he died because of the hatred of the faith. He was not spoken Christian and said repeatedly that all of his controversial opinions were rooted in his Christian faith. It is true that he had conservative political opinions and alliances with political figures, but when the killer is found, I predict that the motive will be hatred of Charlie's religion or opinions directly springing from his Christian faith. The third criteria would seem to apply, since I suspect Charlie Kirk had plenty of death threats and accepted the risk as part of his calling. Finally, Charlie was not a Catholic, but reports from various Catholic sources say he was open to the Catholic religion and was probably on the path to Rome. We know that was not true, that part is debunked. But Charlie, therefore, will not be included in the formal list of Catholic martyrs, but we have always recognized that sincere followers of Jesus Christ who have been baptized are also members of Christ's church, even though not in full communion. The second definition of martyr is the meaning of the word itself, which is simply witness. Charlie lived and died witnessing to his faith in Jesus Christ, so in that sense, he is a true martyr. What we as a nation and as Christians make of his senseless death will be seen in the months and years to come. And then we have Eastern Orthodoxy. Let's listen to what they say.
I just had a thought about Charlie Kirk. His death is tragic, and I'm still mourning it, even though I didn't know the man before he was killed. I'm mourning it because I see an honorable man, and I see such violent hatred and lies being told about him. And I see our society fractured because of God. There are those who want to follow God and those who want to follow the world. But there's a great fruit that's coming out of Charlie's death, and may he find paradise because of it. Because he was searching out about the Orthodox faith. and it's all over the place now. Tucker talks about it, and it's in other videos, and that means people are going to go to the church, and people are going to become Orthodox because of Charlie. So may Charlie be saved, and may many be saved because of Charlie.
So this is where, unfortunately, Jackie Hill Perry and Preston, I think they messed up, is that instead of, in the conversation about martyrdom, instead of bringing actual practice, like some kind of standard, if they just said some kind of actual legitimate standard that is not based on their personal preference, but actually based on some kind of church kind of, theology, they would have had a better time.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for clearing, because that's you actually said it way better than I wanted to say, because I don't want people to hear me saying that I feel like he deserved it, I wasn't sad, or I don't even want people to hear me saying like I don't think that he was a brother, because it's not my place to put him in a heaven or hell, right? I don't think that he denied who Christ was. I think that he said so many so many good things, whether that was about same-sex marriage, whether that was abortion, whether that's, the deity of Christ and the triune God of Scripture. He said so many fundamental Christian things that I align with. But what I want people to understand is, I think sometimes Christian nationalism...
Buzzword. There it is, guys. It's actually kind of funny. This is obviously, you guys know, we've been talking about this. This word is going to come up a lot. And if you watched my last video, we saw what Vodi Bakum was saying about Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism it's sleight of hand. Christian nationalism, it's a scare tactic. It's the boogeyman. Christian nationalism is the boogeyman. And I think a lot of Christians are falling for it. But let's hear what he says.
Because it doesn't give people the ability to actually understand what we go through as Black people, or what we have been through. And I'll give you an example. When Charlie, I remember watching the conversation when Charlie made the comment about it's Juneteenth today, right? But Juneteenth is not a real holiday, so I'm going to work, right? That might be very, very small to you, but for me, I grew up with a grandmother who I've seen probably cry 7 to 8 times about how she hated the fact that her father came back from this country and still didn't have the right to vote.
Yeah.
And so when I celebrate Juneteenth, not me saying I hate the 4th of July. It's not even me saying that I hate my country, but it's me recognizing that my grandfather has a different history than your grandfather might have, right? And so I think sometimes when I hear him say that, it was dismissive to my experience. Yep. It was dismissive to my family's experience. And so when he died, I'm going to have a different emotional experience if you never heard anything that he directly said that was offensive to you. And so I think sometimes we just don't understand that. And I think sometimes what Christian nationalism does, it says, because we love America so much, we love the 4th of July. And so we hate anything that looks different or looks like it's competing with our day. But it's like, no, if 4th of July was given to us for us to remember the past. Mm-hmm. That's the reason why it was literally given it to us. If my grandfather has a different past, for you to dismiss how I experienced my grandfather, it's hurtful. And so it's not even about hating him or not thinking that he's a Christian. It's saying, no, maybe Christian nationalism kind of entwined with his theology in such a way that gave him an inability to see all people the way God probably intended. And so that's what I wanted people to understand.
I don't even know how to properly kind of respond to this, but I think, and I'm making this case, this is even about specifically Preston or Perry or Justin Gaboni here. I think most people have no clue what Christian nationalism is. There's like 10 different definitions going around. Preston has a version, an idea what he thinks, and he's being nice and trying to attribute the negative aspects of Charlie to this concept of Christian nationalism. and he's putting that on Charlie, I would say unfairly, because Charlie most likely had his own interpretation of Christian nationalism. Preston clearly has his interpretation of Christian nationalism. If you're listening to this, there's probably 3 or 4 definitions of Christian nationalism you also have in your head. And it's this buzzword that keeps coming up. And I'm begging for the church to not fall for this. I'm begging you, please do not. It is a trap. Take a breather, inhale, exhale, take a step back, and really evaluate what you're seeing, what you're thinking, because there are so many definitions of that word, and it is something that I'm seeing. I think the devil is, it's like when we know like the devil's in the details. It is a concept that is so convoluted that no one can agree on what the word even means. So Preston is unfairly taking that concept and putting it on Charlie, and in his kindness saying, well, that is the attribution of the negative things that Charlie has said, because Preston says he believes Charlie was a Christian, but the negative things about him was just a result of Christian nationalism. To me, that's heavily flawed. And I want to say this because when I hear, specifically in this case, when I hear them talk, when I hear the Perrys talk, I don't think you actually have conservative friends. And I don't think you have conservative friends that you can actually talk to and talk about these things. And if you say you do, I'm not sure they're conservative. Because again, it's like, and this is kind of the thing Charlie stood for. Charlie believed in conversations. And this conversation needs to be happening with more people. Not just in an echo chamber, in a bubble. If you're going to participate in conversations like this, it has to happen. It can't happen in a bubble.
Good part that I had a huge problem with, which was that in many cases, as I watched Charlie Kirk, he was overly provocative, and he was intentionally insensitive to marginalized people. He played about stuff. And we know, I mean, y'all in this game, to be provocative is, if he wasn't provocative, nobody would probably ever know him, right?
Yeah.
They don't justify it, but especially when you're doing it about these particular subjects, you're playing about stuff that you shouldn't be playing about, that you shouldn't be trying to be provocative on. Let's just say black women. So when he named 3 black women, Michelle Obama, our justice, Supreme Court justice as well, and say, oh, they're just DEI hires. They don't deserve. They don't really have the
brain processing power
to be here. A mature Christian, I think, should, even if you have an issue with DEI, and you think there are some excesses there, which we can have that conversation, you approach it differently when you understand the historical context of a people who throughout their history here have been demeaned and told that they were lesser. And in many instances, sometimes coming out the church, told genetically by birth, you are inferior intellectually.
I don't know. I think there is a sort of level of narcissism in the way people have kind of like, because there's a clear tragedy. Charlie Kirk's death. He's killed. People are mourning. And yet we go out of our way to make his death about me. Like, oh, Charlie Kirk died, but we need to make sure that black people feel okay in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. To me, that doesn't make any sense. To me, that's a little bit insane, because that shouldn't be the standard. That shouldn't be the goal, right? I'm not here to defend Charlie Kirk's words. I don't think that he said everything perfectly. But again, why is it that in the wake of his death, instead of, and this is something, it's frustrating because Charlie Kirk's death has inadvertently become a racial thing when it shouldn't be. And a lot of the people who have issues with Charlie Kirk are black, like, and ranging from a lot of radical people saying a lot of disgusting stuff about Charlie. In this case with the Perrys and Justin, obviously I don't put them in the same category. I think it's very drastic different. They're being very graceful and being very mild, in my opinion. But the sentiment is still there, in the sense where it's like, you're making Charlie's death a racial thing when it doesn't need to be. Because like in his death, instead of just honoring him in some capacity or just not saying anything at all, you need to talk about the history of Black people. Why? Why do we need to talk about the history of Black people? Because he says some things about Black people? Okay, well, he's dead. I don't understand. He's dead and gone. So again, this is in contrast to when I look at other, this is what Catholics and Eastern Orthodox criticize Protestants for. You look at how Catholics approached, the Catholic Church approached Charlie Kirk's death. And you look at how the Eastern Orthodox Church approached Charlie Kirk's death with respect, was saying they were like, without a doubt, he's a Christian. There was no questioning whether or not he was a Christian. They're like, yeah, he was a Christian. He's not a martyr in the formal sense, right? Because he wasn't Eastern Orthodox, he wasn't Catholic. But they're like, yeah, basically, yeah. Like, because we have the traditions, we have the standards. We're not making stuff up. We're not bringing up, history of people groups being oppressed that has nothing to do with whether or not Charlie Kirk's a martyr. He was a brother in the Lord. He died. Was he perfect? No. Did he say some stuff that probably wasn't the best? Absolutely. So have you. I was at a conference recently in Nashville, and at the conference, Charlie Kirk was brought up just in the wake of the conference, and it was a conference about conversations and whatnots, and it wasn't like a specific brought up in Charlie Kirk, but it was kind of those undertones was happening. And in between one of the sessions, a white individual comes up to me and he says, "Oh boy, if I was a Black person, I would be so uncomfortable." And I'm like, why? Why would I be uncomfortable? He's like, "Well, what did you think about, the sessions? They kept bringing up Charlie Kirk." What? Why did you make it a racial thing? I think that really needs to be challenged. Why does it need to be a racial thing? Especially we're acting like 90% of Charlie's message was about Black people when it wasn't. And I just look at this individual, I'm just like, this person's insane, right? And I had conversations with other Black people at this conference who, right, had issues with Charlie Kirk as well. He said, right, he said Black women don't have brain processing power. No, he didn't. I had the guy bring up the clip. He's like, he didn't say Black women. He didn't say all Black women. He never named my mother. Charlie Kirk never named my mother. He never said my mom doesn't have the brain processing power, but that's how Black people are taking it, which is stupid. He named specific people in the context of DEI, and he's making a point. Regardless of how you feel about the point, he's making a point. But for some reason, people can't contextualize that. And this is what my message, and it's my message to any Black person who is kind of looking at Charlie and has issues with Charlie. And there's a lot of people who have said, "Oh, he said a lot of negative things. He can't be a martyr because, he said bad things, conflicting things about Black people. He's racist, yada, yada, or whatever." I hope the standard that you have for Charlie and the things that people are saying about Charlie, I hope people never have that same standard for you if you die. And I think Christians, we really need to reevaluate how we treat people. I think we really need to evaluate the standards we really hold to. Because if we really critique the standards we have for other people, but not ourselves, right? If we really critique the standards we have for other people, you would realize that they are ludicrous. I hope the standards that a lot of people have for Charlie Kirk in his life as a Christian, I hope those standards and those criticisms and those things said about Charlie are never said about you in the wake of your death. Because we know that you have also said controversial things. You have also fumbled the ball. You have also have done things to offend someone. And I hope no one looks at your life posthumously and says, "Well, they're not giving martyr because I didn't like some of the things they said." But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.